They say ignorance is bliss, but I'd argue that ignorance is just expensive. Take my marriage, for instance, 23 years of what I thought was domestic tranquility, only to discover it was more like domestic terrorism with better curtains. My name is Jack Morrison, and I fix things for a living. Cars, mostly, though I branched out into small appliances when the economy went sideways. What I apparently can't fix is my ability to pick trustworthy women or recognize when I'm being played like a fiddle at a county fair. The revelation came on a Tuesday, because of course it did. Tuesdays are the universe's way of reminding you that Monday was just the opening act. I was elbow deep in the engine of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick when my phone buzzed. Laura's phone, actually. She'd left it on my workbench while she made coffee. "Meet me at the Red Roof Inn, you gorgeous thing. Room 237. Can't wait to get my hands on you again. R." Now, my name starts with a J, not an R, and I hadn't been called gorgeous since the Clinton administration. The first one. I stared at that message like it might rearrange itself into something less devastating. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe Laura had a secret career as a romance novelist. Maybe I was having a stroke and hallucinating. Then the photo loaded. Laura, my wife of 23 years, wearing lingerie I'd never seen before, black lace that probably cost more than I made in a week. She was posing in what looked like our bedroom, giving the camera a look that could melt steel, the same look she used to give me back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. I set the phone down carefully, the way you'd handle a live grenade. My hands were shaking, which was problematic since I was holding a wrench. In the kitchen, Laura hummed something cheerful while she clattered around making her morning coffee. The sound made my teeth itch. "Jack, honey, have you seen my phone?" she called out. "It's out here," I managed, proud that my voice sounded almost normal. She appeared in the doorway, all smiles and suburban sweetness. 52 years old and still beautiful, though I was beginning to suspect that beauty was more like camouflage than I'd realized. She wore her school clothes. She was vice principal at the local high school, and looked every inch the respectable educator. "Thanks, sweetheart." She kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume. New perfume. When had she started wearing new perfume? She picked up the phone, glanced at the screen, and her face went through a series of micro-expressions that would have been fascinating if they weren't destroying my world. Surprise, guilt, calculation, then back to that practiced smile. "Work emergency," she said, typing rapidly. "You know how it is." I knew how it was, all right. I just hadn't known how it really was. After she left for school, I sat in my garage for a long time, staring at nothing. The Buick's engine ticked as it cooled, a steady rhythm like a countdown timer. I'd built my life around the assumption that Laura and I were solid. Not passionate anymore, maybe, but solid, reliable. We had our routines, our comfortable silences, our shared eye rolls at the neighbor's drama. Turns out I was the neighbor. The smart thing would have been to confront her immediately. The mature thing would have been to suggest counseling. The legal thing would have been to call a lawyer. Instead, I decided to find out who R was. It didn't take long. Laura had never been particularly careful with her digital footprint, probably because she assumed I was too technologically challenged to figure it out. She wasn't entirely wrong. I still used a flip phone and thought the cloud was something that rained on me. But I wasn't stupid, and I had time. Her laptop was password protected, but the password was our anniversary date. Even her infidelity was lazy. The emails told the whole story. Robert Hale, our illustrious mayor, had been corresponding with my wife for 8 months. The early messages were coy, professional, discussions about school funding that gradually became more personal. Then came the compliments, the private jokes, the increasingly obvious flirtation. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. By month 3, they were meeting for coffee. By month 4, coffee had become lunch. By month 6, lunch had become afternoon appointments at various hotels around town. The recent messages were explicit enough to make a sailor blush. They had pet names for each other. They had inside jokes. They made plans for weekend getaways while I was supposedly visiting my sister in Albany. I'd never visited my sister in Albany. I didn't have a sister in Albany. Robert Hale was 62, married to a woman who looked like she could freeze water with a glance, and had been our mayor for 12 years. He was smooth, political, the kind of man who could sell snow to Eskimos and make them thank him for the privilege. He drove a BMW, lived in the biggest house in town, and apparently had excellent taste in other men's wives. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how stupid it made me feel. All those late nights Laura claimed to be working on school projects. All those weekend conferences that required her to stay overnight in hotels. All those times she'd seemed distracted, distant, like her mind was somewhere else. Her mind had been somewhere else. It had been with Mayor Robert Hale, planning their next rendezvous while I fixed dinner and asked about her day. I printed everything. Every email, every photo, every receipt for hotel rooms and expensive dinners. The paper trail was extensive and damning, a roadmap of deception that stretched back most of a year. Laura might have been careless with digital security, but she'd been meticulous about documenting her affair. That evening, she came home with Chinese takeout and a guilty smile. "Thought I'd surprise you," she said, unpacking containers of sweet and sour chicken. "How thoughtful." I watched her move around our kitchen, noting details I'd missed before. The new jewelry, a gold bracelet that caught the light, the way she kept checking her phone, the slight flush in her cheeks that I'd attributed to the autumn weather. "How was your day?" she asked, the same question she'd asked every day for 23 years. "Enlightening," I said. She paused, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "Oh? How so?" This was my moment. I could lay the evidence on the table, demand explanations, force the confrontation that would end our marriage in screaming and lawyers and divided assets. I could take the high road, the mature road, the road that led to a clean break and a fresh start. Instead, I smiled and reached for the soy sauce. "Fixed Mrs. Patterson's Buick," I said. Turned out the problem was more complicated than it looked. She relaxed, laughed, launched into a story about some drama at school. I nodded in the right places, made appropriate sounds of interest, and planned my revenge. Because here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. People forget you're capable of fighting back. They see the grease under your fingernails, the high school diploma instead of a college degree, the quiet acceptance of whatever life throws at you, and they assume you're harmless. They assume wrong. The Red Roof Inn sits on the outskirts of town like a guilty secret, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour and doesn't ask questions about why you need them. I'd driven past it 1,000 times without giving it a second thought. Now it loomed in my windshield like the gates of hell, neon sign flickering against the gray October sky. I parked across the street at a gas station and waited. Laura had texted someone, presumably the mayor, that she'd be working late on budget reports. She'd kissed my cheek, told me not to wait up, and driven off in her Honda with the kind of eager energy she used to reserve for Christmas morning. The waiting was the hardest part. I sat in my truck, engine running for heat, and wondered what I was doing. This wasn't me. I didn't lurk in parking lots like some discount private investigator. I fixed things, went home, watched television, and minded my own business. But apparently, my business had been everyone else's entertainment for months. At 7:30, a black BMW pulled into the motel parking lot. Even from across the street, I recognized the license plate, Hale 1. Subtle as a brick through a window, our mayor. He parked near the office, straightened his tie in the rearview mirror, and walked inside like he owned the place, which, given the state of local politics, he probably did. 10 minutes later, Laura's Honda appeared. She parked 3 spaces away from the BMW, checked her makeup in her mirror, and headed for the stairs. Second floor, room 237, just like the text had promised. I gave them 20 minutes to get settled, then grabbed my phone and crossed the street. The desk clerk was a kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, probably because anywhere else wouldn't require him to pretend he didn't notice the parade of married people who weren't married to each other. "I'm supposed to meet my business partner in room 237, I told him, "but I think I left my key in the car. Could you—" "Can't give out keys, man. Policy." I slipped him a 20. "It's really important." He looked at the bill, looked at me, shrugged. "Room 237's been rented for the evening. Your partner's probably already up there." "Right, thanks." The stairs creaked under my feet, each step an announcement of my approach. I felt like I was walking to my own execution, except I was pretty sure I was actually walking to someone else's. Room 237 was at the end of the hall, and I could hear voices through the thin door. Laura's laugh, bright and genuine in a way I hadn't heard in years. The mayor's deeper rumble, saying something that made her laugh again. I pressed my ear to the door, feeling like the worst kind of voyeur, and listened to my wife plan a weekend getaway with another man. They were discussing restaurants in the city, shows they wanted to see, how they'd explain their absences to their respective spouses. "Jack won't suspect anything," Laura said. "He barely notices when I'm gone anyway. I could probably move out for a week and he'd just assume I was working late." That stung more than it should have, mostly because it was probably true. "What about Cynthia?" Laura asked. "Cynthia's too busy with her charity committees to pay attention to my schedule. Besides, she stopped caring where I go years ago. They talked about us, their spouses, like we were inconvenient pets that needed occasional feeding. Obstacles to work around, rather than people they'd promised to love and honor. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. I took pictures of the BMW's license plate, the room number, the timestamp on my phone. Evidence for later, when I'd need to prove this wasn't just my imagination running wild. Then I went home and pretended to be asleep when Laura slipped into bed at midnight, smelling like hotel soap and someone else's cologne. The next morning, she was cheerful and attentive, making pancakes and asking about my plans for the day. The performance was flawless. Loving wife, concerned partner, woman who'd spent the previous evening grading papers instead of tangled up with the mayor in a cheap motel room. "You seem happy," I observed. "Do I? I suppose I am. Things are going well at work. I feel like I'm finally making a difference, you know?" Making a difference. That was one way to put it. I spent the day researching Robert Hale, public records, newspaper articles, social media posts from his wife's various charity events. The man was a walking cliché, small-town politician with big city ambitions, the kind of guy who kissed babies during election season and probably forgot their names before the photo op was over. He'd been married to Cynthia for 34 years. She was old money, the kind of woman who could trace her family back to the Mayflower, and probably had the passenger manifest to prove it. Her charity work was legendary, her social connections extensive, her smile as warm as a January morning. Looking at photos of them together, ribbon cuttings, fundraising galas, holiday parties, I couldn't see any obvious signs of marital discord. They looked comfortable, established, like a matched set of expensive bookends. But then, Laura and I probably looked the same way to outside observers. I found Cynthia's schedule easily enough. She was on the board of half a dozen charities, chaired the Historical Society, and played tennis at the country club every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Predictable as sunrise, which made what I was planning much easier. Thursday morning, I put on my best shirt, which wasn't saying much, and drove to the country club. The parking lot was full of luxury cars that cost more than my house. I felt like a fraud walking through the front door, but the girl at the reception desk was too polite to call security. "I'm looking for Mrs. Hale," I said. "I believe she's playing tennis?" "Court 3, the girl said, "but I'm not sure she wants to be disturbed. It's about her husband. Official business." That got me directions to the courts, and a worried look that suggested the girl knew more about the mayor's reputation than she was letting on. Cynthia Hale was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a style that probably had a name and cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She moved around the tennis court like she owned it, which she probably did. I waited until her game was finished, then approached while she toweled off. "Mrs. Hale, I'm Jack Morrison. I wonder if I could have a word with you about your husband." She looked me up and down, taking in the work clothes, the nervous energy, the obvious fact that I didn't belong in her world. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "What about my husband, Mr. Morrison? Maybe we could talk somewhere more private?" She studied me for a long moment, then nodded toward a quiet corner of the clubhouse. We sat at a table overlooking the golf course, and I wondered how to begin this conversation without sounding like a complete lunatic. "Your husband is having an affair with my wife," I said finally. Cynthia's expression didn't flicker. She sipped her water, set down the glass, and folded her hands in her lap. "I see. And you're telling me this because I thought you should know." "How considerate." Her voice was dry as desert sand. "Tell me, Mr. Morrison, what exactly do you expect me to do with this information?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected shock, denial, maybe tears. Instead, she was looking at me like I was a mildly interesting specimen under a microscope. Don't you want to know the details?" "I know the details, Mr. Morrison. I've known about Robert's affairs for years. Your wife isn't his first, and she won't be his last." That hit me like a slap. "You know?" "Of course I know. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid. Robert thinks he's discreet, but he's about as subtle as a marching band." She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those sharp eyes. "The question is, what do you plan to do about it?" "I don't know yet." "Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I might be interested in helping." She stood, gathered her tennis bag, and started to walk away. Then she paused and looked back. "A word of advice, Mr. Morrison. If you're planning some sort of revenge, make it count. You'll only get one chance to surprise them." She left me sitting there, staring out at the perfectly manicured golf course, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Teddy's bar squatted on Main Street like a stubborn old dog that refused to be put down. While the rest of downtown had been gentrified into coffee shops and boutiques, Teddy's remained defiantly authentic. Dim lighting, scarred wooden bar, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged honest conversation or complete silence, depending on your mood. I'd been coming here for 15 years, ever since Teddy Kowalski retired from the police force and bought the place from the previous owner's widow. Teddy was the kind of bartender who remembered your drink, your troubles, and when to keep his mouth shut about both. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said as I settled onto my usual stool. "Something like that." I nodded toward the beer taps. Whatever's coldest. Teddy was 60-something, built like a fire hydrant, with hands that had seen their share of trouble back when he wore a badge. He poured my beer, set it down, and waited. Patience was one of his many virtues. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone wanted to ruin a prominent local figure, how would they go about it?" "Hypothetically?" Teddy's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. "That's a dangerous kind of hypothetical, Jack. The most dangerous kind." He leaned against the bar, considering. The afternoon crowd was light, a few retirees nursing coffee, a couple of off-duty city workers arguing about football. No one was paying attention to our conversation. "Depends on the figure," Teddy said finally. "And what kind of ruin we're talking about. Financial, professional, personal?" "All of the above." "That's ambitious." He refilled my glass without being asked. "We talking about anyone I know?" "You know everyone, Teddy." "True enough." He was quiet for a moment, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. "You want my advice? Whatever you're thinking, think twice. Revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other guy to get sick. What if the other guy deserves to get sick? They always deserve it, Jack. That's what makes it so tempting. I drank my beer and watched the afternoon light fade through the grimy windows. Outside, the town went about its business, people heading home from work, kids walking back from school, the comfortable rhythm of small-town life. None of them knew that their mayor was a cheating snake, or that their vice principal was helping him slither. "There's someone you should meet," Teddy said suddenly. "Yeah?" "Stephanie Chen, reporter for the Herald. She's been sniffing around City Hall for months looking for a story. Smart girl, ambitious, the kind who might be interested in hypothetical situations. The Herald was our local paper, circulation about 3,000 on a good day. Not exactly the Washington Post, but in a town this size, the Herald might as well have been the New York Times." "What makes you think she'd be interested?" "Because she's been asking questions about Mayor Hale's travel expenses. Seems like he's been spending a lot of city money on conferences that don't seem to exist." That was interesting. "How do you know this?" "Because she was in here last week, buying drinks for Jimmy Santos from the city clerk's office. Jimmy gets talkative when he's had a few beers." I considered this. A reporter with an axe to grind against the mayor could be useful, or dangerous, depending on how the story played out. "You think she'd meet with me?" "I think she'd meet with anyone who had information about Hale. Question is, what kind of information are you willing to share?" That was the problem, wasn't it? I had plenty of evidence about the affair, but using it would destroy Laura as much as the mayor. Maybe more, since she had further to fall. A cheating politician was hardly news, but a cheating school administrator in a small town. That would be front-page material for months. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. In my experience, the longer you wait to act on something like this, the more likely you are to talk yourself out of it. I finished my beer and headed home, where Laura was grading papers at the kitchen table. She looked up when I walked in, gave me a distracted smile, and went back to her work. The picture of domestic tranquility. "How was your day?" she asked without looking up. "Productive. Yours?" "Oh, you know. Budget meetings, personnel issues, the usual excitement." She marked something on a paper with red ink, frowning. "I might have to work late tomorrow. We're having some problems with the heating system in the south wing." More lies, delivered with the casual ease of long practice. I wondered how many fictional heating systems, budget meetings, and personnel issues she'd invented over the past 8 months. "That's too bad. Will you be very late?" "Probably. Don't wait up." I went to bed that night planning my next move. Laura thought she was playing chess while I played checkers, but she was wrong. I'd been watching, learning, taking notes. She'd taught me well, even if she didn't know it. The next morning, I called the Herald and asked for Stephanie Chen. "This is Steph," said a voice that sounded younger than I'd expected. "My name is Jack Morrison. I understand you've been investigating Mayor Hale." There was a pause. "Who told you that?" "A mutual friend. I have some information you might find interesting." "What kind of information?" "The kind that's better discussed in person. Are you free for coffee?" Another pause. "When and where?" "Rosie's Diner, noon. I'll be the guy in the blue work shirt reading yesterday's paper." "How will I know it's you?" "Trust me, you'll know." Rosie's Diner was the kind of place that served coffee in thick white mugs and didn't charge extra for refills. I arrived early, claimed a corner booth, and spread yesterday's Herald on the table like a prop. At exactly noon, a young woman walked in and scanned the room. Stephanie Chen was maybe 35, Asian American, with short black hair and the kind of intense energy that suggested she drank too much coffee and not enough sleep. She spotted me immediately. I was the only person in the place reading a newspaper, and slid into the booth across from me. "Mr. Morrison?" "Call me Jack. Thanks for coming." She ordered coffee and studied me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "So what's this about?" I'd rehearsed this conversation, but now that the moment was here, I wasn't sure how to begin. How do you tell a stranger that you want to destroy your wife's lover without sounding like a lunatic? I understand you've been looking into the mayor's finances. Among other things. Why? Because I think his personal life might be just as interesting as his professional one. She leaned forward slightly. Go on. Robert Hale is having an affair. Has been for months. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, expensive gifts, all of it documented. With whom? This was the moment of truth. Once I said Laura's name, there would be no taking it back. My wife. Steph's expression didn't change, but I could see the wheels turning. Your wife is Laura Morrison. She's vice principal at the high school. You know her? I know of her. She has a good reputation in the education community. She paused. Had, I should say. I have evidence, emails, photos, hotel records, enough to prove the affair and probably enough to show he's been using city funds to pay for it. Why are you telling me this? It was a fair question. Because I'm tired of being made a fool of. Because the people in this town deserve to know what kind of man they elected. And because I want both of them to pay for what they've done. Steph sipped her coffee, thinking. This would destroy your wife's career. You understand that? I understand it. And your marriage. My marriage was destroyed 8 months ago. I just didn't know it yet. She nodded slowly. What do you want from me? I want you to investigate. I want you to ask the right questions, look at the right records, talk to the right people. I want the truth to come out. And in exchange, I'll give you everything I have. Documents, photos, timeline, locations. Enough for the biggest story this town has seen in years. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street beyond. Finally, she looked back at me. I'll need to verify everything independently. I won't just take your word for it. I wouldn't expect you to. And I'll need to give them a chance to respond. Journalistic ethics. Of course. When this comes out, and it will come out, there's going to be fallout for everyone involved, including you. I'm counting on it. She finished her coffee and stood up. I'll be in touch, Mr. Morrison. Don't do anything stupid while I'm working on this. Define stupid. Anything that might compromise the story or land you in jail. After she left, I sat in the diner for another hour, drinking coffee and watching the town go about its business. In a few days, maybe a week, everything would change. The comfortable lies would be exposed, the careful facades would crumble, and everyone would see the truth. I couldn't wait. The story broke on a Wednesday morning, above the fold, with a headline that could be read from space. Mayor's secret affair rocks City Hall. Stephanie Chen had done her homework. The article was devastating, professional, and absolutely factual, which somehow made it worse than if it had been a tabloid hit piece. She'd confirmed the hotel stays, traced the credit card receipts, and somehow gotten her hands on the mayor's expense reports. The financial trail was damning. City funds used for restaurants where Hale had entertained his education consultant, travel expenses for conferences that turned out to be romantic getaways, even flowers charged to the municipal account. Laura's name appeared in the third paragraph, identified as a local school administrator who has been involved with Mayor Hale for approximately 8 months. The article was careful not to use inflammatory language, but the facts spoke for themselves. I was drinking coffee in my garage when my phone started ringing. First call was from my daughter Megan, who lived 2 hours away and had apparently seen the story online. Dad, what the hell is going on? Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Don't joke about this. Mom's name is all over the internet. People are saying what's true, Megan. Your mother has been having an affair with Mayor Hale. Silence on the other end. Then, how long have you known? Long enough. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't your problem to solve. And this was your solution? Public humiliation? This was my choice, yes. Another silence. I'm coming home. That's not necessary. It's not up for discussion, Dad. I'll be there this afternoon. She hung up before I could argue. I wasn't sure whether I was looking forward to seeing her or dreading it. The second call came from Laura herself, though I almost didn't recognize her voice. She was crying, which was something I hadn't heard in years. "Jack, please, we need to talk." "I think we're past talking, don't you?" "I'm at school. They've suspended me pending an investigation. The superintendent wants to meet with me this afternoon. My career is over." "Probably." "How can you be so calm about this?" "Practice. I know you're angry, but this isn't the way." "What way would you prefer, Laura? Should I have just pretended not to notice while you and Hale made a fool of me for another 8 months? I never meant for this to happen." "Which part? The affair or getting caught?" She was crying harder now. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can—" "No, we can't. Jack, please." I hung up. The third call was more interesting. Cynthia Hale's voice was as cool and composed as ever, but there was something underneath it that might have been satisfaction. "Mr. Morrison, I believe congratulations are in order." "For what?" "For following my advice. You certainly made it count." I could hear voices in the background, reporters probably, camping out at the mayor's mansion. "How's your husband taking the news?" "Robert is discovering that public humiliation is considerably less enjoyable than he expected. He's locked himself in his study and refuses to speak to anyone, including his lawyer." "And you?" "I'm having the time of my life. Do you know how long I've been waiting for someone to expose Robert for what he really is? Why didn't you do it yourself?" "Because I'm his wife. If I'd been the source, it would have looked like a bitter divorce proceeding. This way, it looks like justice." She had a point. What happens now? Now, Robert resigns in disgrace, I file for divorce and take half of everything he owns, and your wife finds herself unemployed and unemployable. I'd say that qualifies as making them pay, wouldn't you? After she hung up, I sat in the quiet garage and tried to figure out how I felt. I'd expected satisfaction, vindication, maybe even happiness. Instead, I felt empty, hollow, like I'd won a game that nobody should have been playing in the first place. The fourth call came from Teddy. "You need to get down here," he said. "Now." "Why?" "Because half the town is in my bar arguing about whether you're a hero or a villain, and the other half is outside with cameras. You're famous, Jack. Congratulations." I drove to Teddy's through streets that felt different somehow. People stared as I passed, some with sympathy, others with what looked like accusation. Word traveled fast in a small town, and apparently I was now the guy who'd destroyed his wife's career and brought down the mayor in one spectacular act of revenge. The bar was packed, which was unusual for a Wednesday afternoon. I recognized most of the faces, neighbors, customers, people I'd known for years. The conversation died when I walked in, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster, then others joined in. Not everyone, maybe half the room, but enough to make me feel like maybe I wasn't the villain after all. "Drinks are on the house for the man of the hour," Teddy announced, which got a cheer from my supporters and grumbles from the other side. I made my way to the bar, accepting handshakes and pats on the back from people who apparently approved of what I'd done. The other half of the room watched me like I was something unpleasant they'd stepped in. "Quite a day," Teddy said, pouring me a beer. "Just getting started." "What's next?" Before I could answer, the door opened and Laura walked in. The room went quiet. She looked terrible. Red eyes, disheveled hair, the kind of exhaustion that comes from having your life fall apart in public. She scanned the room until she found me, then walked over like she was approaching a firing squad. "We need to talk," she said. "I told you. Not here, outside." The crowd watched us leave, like we were the evening's entertainment. Outside, the late afternoon air was crisp and clean, a sharp contrast to the stale atmosphere of accusation and judgment inside. "You've destroyed everything," Laura said. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. My job, my reputation, my future. Your choice. You made it 8 months ago. She stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, but something closer to recognition. Like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I didn't think you had it in you, she said finally. Neither did I. What now? Do we try to salvage something from this mess, or do we just walk away? It was a fair question, and I'd been dreading it all day. Because despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the public humiliation, part of me still loved the woman I'd married 23 years ago. The problem was, I wasn't sure that woman still existed. I don't know, I said honestly. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. She nodded, like she'd expected as much. I'm staying at my sister's tonight. Maybe longer. I need time to think. Probably a good idea. She started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not about getting caught, about doing it in the first place. You deserved better. Yes, I said. I did. After she left, I stood outside Teddy's for a long time, watching the sun set behind the buildings of downtown. Tomorrow, there would be more fallout, more consequences, more decisions to make. But tonight, for the first time in 8 months, I felt like I could breathe. Inside, the debate about my actions continued. Hero or villain, justified or vindictive, right or wrong. I didn't much care which side won the argument. I'd done what I thought was necessary, and I'd live with the consequences. Besides, the story wasn't over yet. The town meeting was called for Friday night, ostensibly to discuss recent events affecting city leadership. What it really was, everyone knew, was a public trial where the citizens of our fair community would decide whether I was a whistleblowing hero or a vengeful husband who'd taken his personal problems too far. The high school gymnasium was packed beyond capacity. Folding chairs filled the basketball court, with overflow crowds standing along the walls and sitting in the bleachers. I'd never seen so many people in one place in our town, not even for the championship game 3 years ago. Mayor Hale sat in the front row with his lawyer, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in 3 days. Cynthia was notably absent. Word was she'd filed divorce papers that morning and moved back to her family's estate in Connecticut. Laura was there too, sitting across the aisle from her former lover like they were strangers, which, in a way, they were now. The affair that had seemed so passionate and exciting in hotel rooms looked tawdry and pathetic under the harsh fluorescent lights of public scrutiny. I sat in the back, partly because I'd arrived late, and partly because I wanted to observe rather than participate. Megan sat beside me, having driven down from the city that afternoon. She'd been polite but distant, clearly struggling with how to feel about what I'd done. You could have warned me, she'd said when she arrived. Would it have changed anything? Maybe. Probably not. But I could have prepared myself for seeing my mother's name in the newspaper. Fair enough. The meeting was chaired by the deputy mayor, a nervous man named Phillips, who clearly wished he was anywhere else. He called for order, made some remarks about the importance of civil discourse, and opened the floor for public comment. The first speaker was Mrs. Henderson, who'd taught Sunday school for 40 years and had opinions about everything. She took the microphone like she was accepting an award. I want to say that what we've witnessed this week is a travesty, she began. Not the affair, though that's certainly shameful, but the way it was exposed. Marriage problems should be handled privately, not splashed across the front page of the newspaper. Murmurs of agreement from one section of the crowd, grumbles of disagreement from another. Furthermore, Mrs. Henderson continued, I think we need to remember that Mayor Hale has done good things for this community. Yes, he made a mistake, but does one mistake erase years of public service? It does when it involves stealing from the taxpayers, someone shouted from the back. Order, Deputy Mayor Phillips said weakly. The next speaker was Tom Bradley, who owned the hardware store and had never liked politicians of any stripe. I don't care who the mayor sleeps with, he said, but I care when he uses my tax dollars to pay for it. The man's a thief, and thieves don't belong in office. This got applause from about half the room, and so it went for the next hour. Speaker after speaker, some defending Hale, others condemning him, most of them taking shots at me for the way I'd handled the situation. I was called everything from a patriotic whistleblower to a vindictive snake, sometimes by the same person. Finally, Phillips called my name. Mr. Morrison, would you like to address the community? I hadn't planned to speak, but the invitation hung in the air like a challenge. Megan squeezed my hand. You don't have to, she whispered. Yeah, I do. I made my way to the front of the gymnasium, feeling hundreds of eyes tracking my movement. The microphone squealed when I adjusted it, a sound that made everyone wince. I'm not much of a public speaker, I began, so I'll try to keep this simple. The crowd settled into attentive silence. 3 days ago, most of you didn't know my name. I was just the guy who fixed your cars, the quiet husband who minded his own business and didn't cause trouble. I liked it that way. I looked out at the sea of faces, neighbors, customers, people I'd known for years. But sometimes minding your own business isn't enough. Sometimes you discover that your business has become everyone else's entertainment, and you have to decide what to do about it. I found Laura in the crowd. She was staring at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. I could have handled this privately. I could have confronted my wife, demanded she end the affair, maybe gone to marriage counseling. That would have been the mature thing to do. Nods from the Mrs. Henderson faction. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about my marriage. When a public official uses taxpayer money to fund his personal affairs, that's everyone's business. When he lies to his constituents while living a double life, that affects the whole community. More nods, this time from the Tom Bradley side. So yes, I exposed the affair. Yes, I gave information to the newspaper. And yes, I knew it would destroy my wife's career and my marriage. I did it anyway, because sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. I paused, looking around the room one more time. I'm not asking for your approval or your sympathy. I'm just asking you to remember that the truth matters, even when it's ugly, especially when it's ugly. I handed the microphone back to Phillips and returned to my seat. The applause was scattered and uncertain, like people weren't sure whether they'd just heard a confession or a justification. Thank you, Mr. Morrison, Phillips said. Now, Mayor Hale, would you like to respond? Hale stood slowly, like a man walking to his own execution. He'd been mayor for 12 years, and he knew how to work a crowd, but tonight he looked broken. I want to apologize, he began, his voice barely audible through the microphone. To my wife, to Mrs. Morrison, to the citizens of this community. I made terrible choices, and I've hurt people who trusted me. He cleared his throat, gathering strength. Mr. Morrison is right about one thing. I used city funds inappropriately. I told myself I was borrowing the money, that I'd pay it back. But that doesn't excuse what I did. I violated your trust and my oath of office. The gymnasium was quiet now. Effective immediately, I'm resigning as mayor. I'll also be making full restitution to the city for any funds I used inappropriately, with interest. This got a reaction. Gasps, murmurs, a few scattered cheers. Hale waited for quiet, then continued. I know my apology doesn't fix the damage I've caused, but I hope, in time, you'll remember the good things we accomplished together, not just the mistakes I made. He handed back the microphone and sat down heavily. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but Hale just shook his head. Phillips called for a vote of no confidence, which was really just a formality at this point. The measure passed overwhelmingly, making Hale's resignation official. As people filed out of the gymnasium, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Stephanie Chen, the reporter who'd broken the story. "How does it feel?" she asked. "How does what feel?" "Getting your revenge. Was it worth it?" I thought about that as I watched Hale leave through a side door, avoiding the crowd and the cameras. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. A man who'd lost everything that mattered to him in the space of a week. "Ask me in a year," I said. Outside, the October air was sharp and clean. Megan walked beside me to my truck, neither of us speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. "What happens now?" "Now I go home, fix some cars, and try to figure out what the rest of my life looks like." "And Mom?" "Your mother will have to figure that out for herself." We reached my truck, and she gave me a hug that felt like forgiveness, or at least understanding. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I don't agree with how you did it, but I'm proud that you stood up for yourself." After she drove away, I sat in my truck for a while, watching the last few people leave the high school. The building looked different in the darkness, smaller, less significant. Like everything else in town, it would never quite be the same. I thought about Laura, probably packing her things at her sister's house, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that had been built on lies. I thought about Hale, facing divorce, disgrace, and possible criminal charges. I thought about Cynthia, finally free of a marriage that had been a prison. And I thought about myself, 54 years old, alone for the first time in decades, with a reputation as the man who'd brought down the mayor and destroyed his own marriage in the process. Tomorrow, I'd go back to fixing cars and small appliances. People would still bring me their broken things, trusting me to make them work again. Some would treat me like a hero, others like a villain, most like the same guy I'd always been. But I'd know the truth, even if nobody else did. I'd know that sometimes the only way to fix something is to break it first, completely and publicly, so everyone can see how broken it really was. I started the truck and drove home through empty streets, past dark houses full of people who would spend the weekend talking about what had happened at the town meeting. By Monday, there would be new gossip, new scandals, new drama to occupy their attention. But tonight, for the first time in 8 months, I felt like I could sleep peacefully. The truth was out, the lies were exposed, and the people who'd made a fool of me had finally gotten what they deserved. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was justice. And sometimes, that's enough.